Good afternoon, first additional language, I'm sorry. It is now today, the 20th of October. It's week 11. We've got one more week to go and then we finish this semester. Can you believe it? And it's now 4:20. So I'm just trying to get my learning event in on assessments before today is over. So let's just go to share my screen with you. Here we go. I'm just trying to get my slideshow going. There we go. And I'm just going to go back one. I'm sure many of you who use this for your assignment 2, the Zoom option, are quite pleased because of the fact that it can change everything to an MP4 and you can upload that on YouTube, and then you've got everything together. It makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? So let me go to my first slide. As you can see, we're on Unit 3 still, language in practice. But now we're creating tests and assessments and rubrics. We're especially going to look at the different criterion-based tests and a bit of the theory behind what happens in CAPS. So I hope you're going to find this interesting. It's all about assessment. And I hope you're not feeling a bit like that image here with someone sitting with lots of question marks around his head what he thinks about tests. Remember that you are the teachers now. You have to create tests that your students can understand, that anybody reading your test and your marking guide can understand, because those instructions and the clarity of the questions are so important to give you valid and reliable tests. And I'm sure being part of assignment 3 now, you're all thinking about this as well. So let's just get to my spreadsheet for week 11. As you can see, week 9 is 46 and 92. I've extended the week 9 until the 22nd, which is Friday night, because a lot of you were experiencing a few problems with ECI going down on Sunday night. Week 8 was 50, week for FUT, 100 for SPs for week 8. We're already on 92 for week 9. So I'm sure by Friday, I'm hoping we're going to surpass my biggest one, which was 104. Let's see how we go. Some of you already started with your week 10s. That is finished on the 24th, I think it's Sunday, because I've extended your assignment 3 due date till Monday midnight, which is the 25th. And there you can see your assessments 1, 2, 3, and 4. 3 and 4 are going to come in the next 10 days, just like that, making you all feel very happy. I'm sure that we're getting to the end of the road. Assignment 3 is just about due. Assignment 2 is in the marking process for first additional language, SP and FET. All the marks are out for assignment 1, for SOA, for late registration. For the first submission, some people are saying they can't see their marks on Turnitin. I just don't know why, because they're all there and they have been revealed. Assignment 2 is in process. Let's see how quickly we can go. Okay, so let's just keep this ball rolling and not get sad about things. Right, so this is where we are. We've done the first 2 sections of Unit 3. We've looked at applying critical language awareness. We looked at choosing suitable text last week. And this week, we're looking at creating tests and assessment rubrics. There is a section from Ferreira, but I'm going to concentrate on Colleen. Most of my lecture tonight is taken from Colleen chapter 15. It's amazing. This is a CAPS-based book. So if you ever get my recommended book, you're really going to find it really worthwhile. And it's the last chapter of Colleen, on which most of tonight's or this afternoon's lecture is based. And then next week, we're going to look at theories behind assessment, which is also quite interesting as well. So why do we assess our learners? Why do I assess you? A lot of you don't find it a lot of fun, but it's something that we need to do, because this is how we show progress and how we can go from one degree to another. We can pass PGCE because you have been assessed and you've gone through all your assignments and you've passed it. So from CAPS, there's a national protocol for assessment. It's basically in section 4 of the CAPS document, right from grade R to grade 12. And it's to generate evidence that your learners have performed and that you've recorded these assessments and you reported them. So it's this whole sequence that's regarded as formal assessment, which has to show evidence that your learners have actually performed. You allocate marks like I do, and these in CAPS are translated into achievement levels. We'll look at these just now from 1 to 7, and within those levels, you get your marks and how you are going to be passing or failing. And then it's going to determine whether you can pass to the next grade, your learners, or if you have got your PGCs at the end of this. I think you all know the process. This is what I think is just about the last few pages of the section 4 in the CAPS document. You've got the rating code 7, which is outstanding achievement, 80 to 100. The only issue with this, I don't ever say what aspect of 7 you are. So is it 85? Is it 81? Is it 98? So there's no notifications within that. Or if you say you get a 1, is it 28, or is it 10, or is it 15, or is it 5? So there's no differentiation between those different things. I think a lot of people would like to know exactly how good they were with their 7 or how bad they were with their 2. Right, and if you're a bit like Bart here, he gasps, he says, I passed, I got a D minus. Okay, and sometimes I say there's nothing wrong with 50. If you pass and you've got 50, no one's going to say to you, what did you get for first additional language? They're not going to worry about it as long as you've passed it. So 50 is good, it's a pass. So why are our learners assessed? Okay, it serves all kinds of purposes. It's also for the teacher, it's a meaningful indicator as a teacher. What do they know and what can they do? What do you know as my students for setting an assignment 3, your whole protocol that goes around doing a paper 1, paper 2, or paper 3, and how your memorandums looked at? It gives me a determination of what you know and what you can do. And it's also to evaluate your progress, see if there's any gaps in your knowledge and skills. And often when I mark your assignments, I can see those gaps. I see a lot of students still don't know what in-text referencing is. They still don't know what white space is. They still don't know what contextualized grammar questions are. So all of these things, I can see that there are gaps in knowledge, and I'm not too sure how we're going to bridge those gaps. It's to give you feedback, and hopefully you can all see your feedback on your scripts, but you also have to give your learners feedback. And remember the TAG acronym, tell them something you like. I really like the way you provided headings. I really liked your topics for your assignments, for your paper 3s. Ask a question. Well, what about giving 2 options for the narrative choice? Okay. Give a suggestion then afterwards. I see you've only got 1 question for your narrative choice. What about giving 2 choices? And then it's a basis for reporting your achievement to your parents, to your guardians, to whoever wants to look at those reports, your grannies, your granddads. It's your basis for reporting, and there you get your report card, your transcripts, and all the marks on there. And the lady looks quite delighted with her marks. And it also helps me as a lecturer and you as a teacher to identify ways to improve your teaching. So if everyone's getting 1s, there's something wrong. What can I do to make sure my students get 7s for this section? Those are important things to consider. So these are all things that you need to think about. So appropriate assessment, what can it do? Okay, it can extend your learners' understanding of things. It can also encourage them to put effort into their learning. Not into their earning, into their learning. This is because if they can see, especially you've got a rubric, and they can see that they got 6 out of 10 for 1 and 4 out of 10 and 2 out of 10, they can see where I can improve and what I can do better there. It also helps the teacher to diagnose what they're battling with. They didn't know how to cite in-text references. They couldn't recognize the present tense. And what can I do to rectify that? So those are all questions you can get. The student is anxious, lost, doesn't know what he must do or she must do, and how are you going to help the student and motivate them? What barriers do they have to learn? Are they falling asleep in your class all the time? Okay, what can you do about that? Are they in grade 9 and they can't read yet or write properly? What are you going to do about that? Are they never in school? What are you going to do about that? And then you can determine a way ahead, a solution to help you can revise and what you must reteach. What can I do? What's going wrong here? They don't recognize passive voice. So that's the what. When don't they do that? When we've got a quiz, they can't actually change from active to passive. How can I do this? How am I going to revise this section? So my assessments must become purposeful. I must be doing something that is meaningful. So if I want to assess writing, for instance, I will not give them a multiple choice closed type exercise because that's not purposeful. because I don't know if I look at a close or a multiple choice essay and they get 100%, is it purposeful? Do they know how to write an essay or a transactional piece of writing? So it must be an appropriate form of assessment. If I want to assess their reading ability and do they know what meanings are different words, maybe I can give them multiple choice. That's all it's going to show me is that they know certain vocab words, but it won't be able to tell me that they can understand the meaning of what the writer is trying to say. So what you've got to do, you've got to try and minimize the factors that can lead to misinterpretation of what the responses are in assessment. So let's go back to the essay question. So if I give them multiple choice for an essay and they get 100%, then I can sit back and say, all my students are so clever, they all got 100% for their essay. But will that be correct? Do they know how to write an essay? And that is the problem with that. So you've got to think about the purpose of your assessment. Is it reliable? Is it trustworthy? Is the information true that you're giving out, that you say my students can all write an essay because they get 100%? I've given them multiple choice questions in that. Is that really a reliable form of purposeful assessment that I can use in decision making? So in assessment, you've got to have a goal, you've got to evaluate, you've got to analyze what the results are. I've got to think about my students that have failed assignment 1, 2, 3, what is happening? What can I do to change this? And I've already started doing that. I'm changing assessments for 2022 to try and stop plagiarizing, to stop downloading from the internet. I've already tried to start to do this with forcing you to use a certain text and not allowing you to download answers from the department. So these are ways I'm trying to analyze and change that students can work with original material. Okay, so there are two different kinds of assessments we're going to look at. We're going to look at the formal and the informal, and CAPS also differentiates between the formal and the formal. And we're also going to look at the formative and the summative. There are also two different kinds of assessments. So a formal assessment is a pre-planned test. Your students must know about it. It mustn't just be a surprise test. And it allows me to measure how well the student has mastered my learning outcomes. Do they know how to write an introduction? So I will pre-planned a formal assessment for my students to write an introduction to an essay, and then I can assess how well they have mastered those outcomes. So it's a substantial assessment task, and I must give official record of results as I give for your assignments, that these marks go on to Turnitin and they come through to Gradebook. Assessment task types are very specific in CAPS, and we're going to look at that, what they need to do, how many of them they need to do, what the mark allocations are. They also form part of the yearly assessment plan. So if you go and look at section 4, you can see it's very well planned out what they should do beginning, middle, and at the end of the year. They occur at a special time in the semester. Must have a detailed marking guide, and you must be able to give feedback to your students. So that marking guide is just as important as determining when you're going to write that assessment. And yes, they mustn't be a surprise. They must know beforehand what the test is going to be, when the exam is going to be, so they can prepare for it. So we're not going to surprise them, because this is a formal assessment. It's not informal. They are high stakes tests. They're going to pass or fail because of it. Low stakes are informal. Maybe you're not even going to take those marks down. This is a developmental type of test that they're going to have. Yes, and here's a lovely cartoon. I'm going to need more specific feedback on my formative assessments. You can't just say bad dog, bad essay. You've got to say, remember all the whole things, what you liked, question about it, and then how they can improve. So start with informal and formal. We look at informal now, where there's no pressure. There's not a high stake test, all right? They can sit in their desks and they can have fun with their assessment. It can occur at any time. They don't have to really be aware that they are being assessed. It doesn't always require a product. They don't always have to write a paragraph, a task, or summary. It can be something more informal, like something you're observing. It can be a discussion. How are they discussing this in their group? Do they seem to understand the concepts? I don't have to record the details of it. That's not necessary, but it's my informal test. Teachers may choose to keep details to help them plan interventions or reflect on their teaching. So I might keep an indication of what was going on, so that I can reflect on it and I can put an intervention in place, because no one knew how to find the main points for the summary. They weren't scanning the options properly, for instance. So do the students sort of understand? Do they totally understand, or they don't understand at all? And then you can plan your intervention and you know exactly what is your interventions about. So let's look at formal assessment. It's for first additional FET. We'll look at SP as well, page 77 of CAPS. It's the National Protocol Assessment for grades R to 12. It's a school-based assessment, SBA, and it's used in all grades, in all subjects, and you can find it in the CAPS document. This SBA is a combination of the formative, which is a developmental type of assessment, and the summative, which happens at the end. It's the exams. Differs per grade, and it's described in the CAPS document. Remember, it's your to-go-to manual is your CAPS document for everything. And you'll find this in section 4 as well. You can see this is for FETs. The formative or the more informal type of assessment happens during the year, which counts 25%. There must be 2 tests, 7 tasks, and 1 examination. And then the end of the year exams and count 75%, which is made up of written 62% and 12% is for your oral assessment tasks. So that is how you get your formal assessment for FET. This is for grade 12. Again, during the year, your school-based assessments 25%, the end of the year 75%, with your written examinations counting 62%, and then your oral assessment counting 12.5%. It's all laid out. SPs, there we go, grade 8, 40%, the SBA, so it's far more, it counts more, and the end of the year exam is only 60%. They combine these two to give you your formal assessment mark. This is for grades 9, also again 60 and 40% formal assessments. Right, so the formative and the summative assessments are quite different. Formative is your developmental assessments. These occur during the course of instruction. It's for teachers to find gaps in what students know or don't know, their understanding and their skills, their whole content knowledge. What do they know and what don't they know? Because why do we do this? Because we want to close those learning gaps. We want to understand why they don't know how to change from present to past tense, or why they don't know what different parts of speech are. For instance, I'm using the grammar examples. Why can't they write a transactional informal letter? Why don't they know that structure? It gives you an opportunity to use this information to make diagnostic feedback to your learners. You can say, look, all of you are battling with referencing now, so we're going to spend a bit of time on that. That you also have a limited understanding on how to conclude an essay or how to change from direct to indirect speech. So it's diagnostic, and this is what often with this grade 9s, they write the diagnostic test at the end of grade 9, so we can determine what they know and what they don't know. This sort of formative feedback, developmental feedback, helps the learners to understand what they need to improve in their learning. So it's not to judge them, to make them fail, it's for developmental purposes. And then you can also make amendments to your instruction. You reteach some things, you get more opportunities for practice, so they can all write a nice summary, okay, which is what they do the best often as well. So why do we have formative assessment? For remediation, so we can improve, so they can improve as well. Let's look at summative. This is at the end of the course, it's your exams. For me, you do mostly formative, you don't do a big final exam at the end. It's to draw conclusions about what the learners know, their understanding and their skills. Here's a maths equation, and the terrible sum of them, they say, all right, now let's see how much you remember, and you're going to pass or fail because of that. So that's quite scary. We do this at the end of the course, and so therefore it has limited value. Listen to this. Your exams have limited value because the information cannot help you learn more. Okay, it's finished, it's over and done. They say in the UAE, it's khalas, nothing else can be done, it's finished, it's over. So none of this information can help the learners to grow anymore. So it's very limiting. It's the same with essays. When they don't have a chance to practice and do drafts and just give them a mark, it serves no purpose. It's limited, that feedback, because they can't improve on the next essay. So formative assessment helps to improve your learning, whereas summative assessment helps to grade the students, their pass or fail mark. So I love this cartoon. If you're going up a ladder of learning, 1, 2, 3 are all formative, all the developmental, formative, formative, formative. And only the last one, once you've practiced, once you know what the gaps are, do you get to summative top of the ladder. And that's when you get to the end of the year and you've done a lot of formative, so therefore you can pass. So let's look at the basic CAPS assessment requirements. There's the CAPS document, which all of you should have somewhere tucked away, either in a hard copy or in a soft copy on your PCs. So they need you to gather valid and reliable information on your learners' performance, ongoing, all the time, not a once-off, and it must be valid. Remember I said, give them the right kind of assessments, not a multiple choice type quiz for essay writing, and it must be reliable. So that means there must be clearly defined criteria in your rubric. What are they going to be assessed on? How clear are those criteria? What methods are you going to use? What tools and contexts? If you want to do multiple choice, it must be more factual things that you're going to ask them, maybe like meanings of words, antonyms, synonyms, but you don't use multiple choice for summary writing. It just doesn't work for that. Then you're going to record those findings so that you can track your learners' progress. It's not just letting them write the test and you don't do anything, you track how they're progressing. And I actually do this for you. I've got a whole run of all your marks. And as you do another assignment, I go and check and I see how you're going. So I'm tracking to see how you're progressing. And you can see here's like a mark sheet, and then you can see there Chinky got a B+. If you look at his maths accounting, you got for English, Chinky got 69%. Didn't do so well for maths, you got 42%. And there you can see that his percentage and how can we assess that. So then we report on their progress like that. And the parent gets the report card at the end, or the guardian or the friend or whoever it is, the person that receives it. So let's look at assessment reliability. And you can see there's 8 things. Yes, there's 8 things about reliability that we're going to look at. And then we'll be finished off with tonight's lecture. So remember, we're trying to make our assessments reliable. Okay, we don't want a not reliable. They say, oh, that test doesn't count because you can't write an essay based on multiple choice. So let's look at assessment reliability. First thing is number of items. Okay, what does that mean? Do we have a test and a small number of questions are unreliable? Okay. So let's think about a multiple choice type question and you get one thing wrong, okay, and it's unreliable. That's not going to make that's going to make quite a big difference. Say there's 10 questions and you get one wrong, that means you get 90%. But if it's a high stakes type of exam and you make one little mistake, it's not really going to count that much. So let's look at the number of items first of all. How many number of questions are unreliable which don't really count? Okay, there's your standardized test. There's all the multiple choice. How do we make sure that these are all reliable, that they are measuring what they should be measuring? I'm not measuring something that is difficult to answer. So if it only measures a small number of aspects like that, there's 3 questions, but it won't make such a big difference. But as the number increases, there might become more of a problem if most of your questions are unreliable. That means your best student in your class is getting them all wrong. Why is that happening? There's something wrong with the question. Or someone who doesn't really know what's happening gets them all right. That means it's very unreliable. There's something wrong with your questioning. So you've got to then think about the number of items in your test and who's getting them right and what are they understanding. What is the range of outcomes? Am I only testing the knowledge items or the remembering, but am I not testing the creative, the analytical, the synthesizing type? So what type of LOs am I measuring? Like the longer the test, like your long content type questions, like for history and for your literature, this also reduces the chance factors, like simple mistakes. So if they make one little mistake in a long essay question, it's not really, one spelling mistake is not going to make a big difference. But if they've got the shorter questions and they're making lots of mistakes, it might be a big difference to their assessment, okay? Yes, but remember that if your test is too long, it can also make your students can also be exhausted, and there's learner fatigue in that as well. So don't make your test too long. Look at CAPS, they give you all the hours, what it should be. Okay, you don't want your students to look so exhausted like you often look. I suppose you might look after doing one of my assessments. The second point that CAPS wants you to look at is how reliable. Is it measuring what it should be measuring? Okay. Am I only giving them a limited opportunity to demonstrate what they've learned? So that means I'm only giving them knowledge and remembering type questions, and I'm not giving them many more creative, evaluative type questions. So they can't really show me how much they know. So am I limiting them in giving them just easy questions, not giving those who know exactly what the more difficult questions? Or it's so difficult that they're discouraged and they won't attempt the question. So I can't make it too easy, so you can't show me what you know, but I can't make it too hard. It must be a nice mix of easy and hard to balance out my paper. So if it's too easy, there's only limited information about the learner's knowledge. So you must rather have a range of questions. Think about Bloom's all the time, or the levels, the cognitive levels from CAPS. Easy questions will encourage, so give a lot of easy questions at the beginning. Difficult questions challenge, and maybe leave them for the end. Don't give all the difficult questions at the beginning, because you might discourage your students as well. You know, the up and the down of that. So put the more difficult questions, the more challenging questions towards the end. Otherwise, they might just give up your students and not try and answer those questions. It's often a good idea to give at the end, but I also encourage my students always to go and look at those questions, because interestingly, the brain is an amazing thing. So if you look at that hard question, you might think, oh my word, I can't answer that. But if I start answering the easy questions, my brain starts thinking about that. And then I start getting ideas. So by the time I get to that question at the end, I can actually answer it. Okay, so that's a good technique to think about. Let's look at a census, still with assessment viability, but let's look at test item discrimination. If they have a high level of understanding, should they answer correctly? Okay, they should do. So if I really understand the work, I should be able to answer it correctly. That's right. But if I've got a low level of understanding, I should answer incorrectly. Is that right? Okay. But you don't want, as I said, for all your clever students, or those who really know, to get them all wrong, because what is wrong with your questions then, and vice versa. So you need questions that can discriminate well. All right, so if they do not discriminate well, learners who have different levels of understanding will show that the test is not very reliable. So students who know their work must be able to answer them correctly, and students that don't understand their work must get it wrong. So they need to know the difference. You mustn't have your questions so close in meaning that they can't actually differentiate between what is right and what is wrong. All right, those are two wrong ones. So let's get reliability on to number 4, guessing. Okay, how often in multiple choice can you just go through it in no time at all, because you can just guess it through. Somebody said there's a sequence you can go through and you'll always get 50%. So the more they guess, remember, this is what students always say, try and make an answer, the less reliable it is. And true false questions all the time are very unreliable, research has shown. So they must rather be questioned about what they know, get it right, or if they don't know, they will get it wrong. So look at your question wording and the instructions, and this is so important when you set in your assignment 3. I read through your assignments, your question papers, and I see if I can work out what I must do. And if I can't, there's something wrong with your paper, it's faulty. So if learners do not understand what they're required to do because you've used confusing words, maybe I do that as well, or you've not put in all the information, the test results will be unreliable. And that's why those of you that have been sending your question papers into me as drafts, and I've been giving you feedback, it's often when I can't understand a question that I will give a comment, because then your students aren't going to understand the question either. So with reliability, let's just look at the classroom. Is it noisy? It should be COVID protocols in place with 1 meter away from each other, but if it's noisy, it's hot, it's dusty, the wind is blowing, it's raining. What happens when you're writing a test in that kind of environment? It'll hinder the students as well. it'll make it harder for them to display their learning if it's too noisy or too hot. I remember in one of my university exams, I had somebody next to me sniffing all the time, all right? And that kind of thing can irritate you because you can't concentrate on the question because you're waiting for the next person to sniff again. So eventually I asked one of the supervisors or invigilators to bring this person a tissue so that they wouldn't have to sniff anymore. What about answer interpretation? Okay, you've got your subjective type questions, the factual questions, they're easy to mark. But what about the subjective ones, the essays? Most of your assignments are subjective and means that the markers have got to interpret what you're saying. And that becomes a bit critical as well if they can't understand what you're saying. So this becomes harder. With your online trackers, it's objective. The system marks it, but subjective is your assignments. And sometimes it's very hard to be objective or subjective when you can't really understand what the learner is writing. So multiple choice requires little interpretation. The computer can mark it for you, but essays, long assignments require high levels of interpretation from the marker. So if you look at subjective, it means that it's based on my personal opinion, my judgment, my feelings, or my point of view. So often when I'm judging you, it's because of that. But I try to be objective because I've got my rubric and I try to apply those criterion across the board in a standardized way. Whereas if it's objective, it's factual, it's based on observation, measurement, which is what the online trackers do as well. We try to be as objective as possible. That's why we have rubrics and very tight marking guides. Yes, coming on to the rubric. If my rubrics are tight and the criterion are all there, then that means my assessment judgment can be more reliable. Number 8, yes, we're getting there. Clarity and completeness of the marking guide. I'm coming on to open questions, coming on to summary questions. When the open questions, a lot of you say, mark any answer. No, no, no. You've got to give suggested answers to your markers, the type of answers to expect. You've got to give the content questions to the summary in your marking guides so that the markers know what is right and what is wrong. So it must be complete and clear marking guides. Give them all the information, all the instructions, all the mark allocations, and the ticks, okay? So without a comprehensive marking guide, it is difficult to get marking consistency, even if there's only one marker. And I know I actually go back and I monitor myself because sometimes I'm tougher on the first papers than I am towards the end to make sure I'm maintaining marking consistency. But often if I've got a rubric, I will maintain that consistency in spite of that. Okay, so how can I benchmark learner performance? Colleen goes through 3 kinds of criterion. It's norm-based, criterion-based, and standard-based. And we can quickly just look at the differences between this and how I can benchmark learner performance. So what I can do is I've got Sally standing on the side here. I'm going to compare her to the other people in her class in terms of norms. So where is Sally compared to the rest of the people in her class? So I'm going to compare individuals with the performance of other learners. And I'm going to rank them in their position. So Sally is going to be number 4 because I've taken the average of a test and she's only ranked number 4. Okay. So we standardize the test and we mark all the tests in the same way. Then we get an average mark. And the basis of that, we rank our students from 1, 2, 3, 4 to 50, 60, 100, 200. The limitation of this kind of method is that the reporting achievements takes attention away from what they have learned or not learned. So although Sally might be 2, what does she know? What doesn't she know? If she's number 4 and they all don't know very much, I'm not saying very much about how much she's learned, but if they're all high achievers and she's number 4, then she can say, well, maybe she does know a lot. But can you see the limitation here? That I'm taking away from what they know or they don't know if I'm only ranking them according to their averages. Here we've got criterions, reference-based references. Yeah, I'm not comparing Sally to her other people in her class. I say to pass this assessment, you must get 10. Okay, where is Sally? She's at 9.5. There we go. So she's nearly there. She's made most of the outcomes. And so she's nearly made what she should do. I'm not worried about how other students have done. I'm looking how Sally has done. I'm not putting her against anyone else. I'm measuring her about her ability. And this is closer to what CAPS does as well. So I'm comparing her performance to the performance criteria, not what the other learners have done. So it demonstrates whether she has reached that performance level or not. Okay, she hasn't got 10, but she's quite close to it. I use a standardized test and I mark it in the same way, using a checklist to make sure I've included all the criteria. And then I see if the learner meets the minimal criteria, they will then pass. So if I say, well, they need to get 60 as minimal, if Sally gets 55, she fails, okay? But if she's got 95, she's actually passed. So you decide on the minimal criteria. A lot of institutions don't have 40 or 50 as the minimal criteria. They do have it, in fact, as 60. And if you get 55, you will have actually failed. Okay, so it's difficult in designing the appropriate criteria. What are the criteria? Each one of these must be, because it must describe the minimal level of performance. So if this criteria is 4, what do they need to get? Do they get 2 or they get 1? Do they pass or they fail? The problem is you have this bipolar categorization of have or not achieved those important criteria. So it disguises other important facts. It does not state what learners have learned or what they can learn. I'm saying you haven't reached those criteria, but I don't really know what you have learned, and I don't know what more you can learn. So that's also a limitation of this. Okay, now we get on to the standards reference, which is closest to the CAPS. Learners' demonstration of learning is compared to detailed descriptions of different levels of achievement. So if you remember the CAPS document, they've got 1 to 7. So if I've got a 6, that shows you where I am according to these different levels. And there's a range of achievement levels with each outcome. So remember, 7 is from 80 to 100. So it could be 80 to 85, 85 to 90, 95 to 100, and so on. And this might make the learners more motivated to strive for excellence. Tests are administered in the same way. There can also be allowance for students with special needs, those who need extra time, those who maybe need a scribe to help them write. And then my performance is judged by comparing it with the details of the other standards. Okay, so this way the learner's performance is matched to the standard, and this automatically places them on a continuum of achievement. Okay, so they've got a 7-year, a 6-year, a 3-year, or a 2-year. The standard-based approach is an approach that compares the students' performance to the standards rather than comparing them to other students. So if I've got a 7, I'm not saying this I'm being compared to someone else like the ranking. I'm just giving you what my performance is. So that's performance-based assessment. Number 3, the standards reference assessment, saying that CAPS does not describe it as a standards reference, although it is very similar. However, there are the mandated recording and reporting of learning achievements that's required by CAPS. And it has many similarities to this kind of standardized reference assessment. For example, if the learner achieves on CAPS a 7, there are possible achievements that are not there and that are not placed in rank order. So we're showing them on that level 7, okay? And here we go, there's the CAPS, you got your number 7, you got number 1, and where are you placing the achievement of the student within that standard? So what different assessments measure? This is a criterion. It does not, it compares the student to other students, okay? This is the other kind of criterion, which is more the norm referenced. It says here, but not achieve proficiency according to criterion based. The student may be typical, there we go, but it's not meeting that need. There's a student right at the bottom as well. This is the standard based, which we understand more from the CAPS. Progressing well towards academic standards, says number 2. So this is their level that they've got. So let's just quickly look at marking, okay? You're all teachers, you're going to be marking a lot in the years to come. So marking should be a systematic process of comparing learners' work with the marking guide. So how do we systematically mark what the students have done with our marking guide? So first of all, in our marking guides, we've got to clarify exactly what must be assessed. Okay, what are we marking? We might have many markers, and inter-rater reliability is so important that if one gives 10, all should be giving 10. So review a sample of learner scripts to be sure that the marking guide allows markers to assess and comment on relevant aspects of the learner's work. Mark blind. That means sometimes it's a good idea not to see the person name so that you can be more objective when you mark it. So it's good to mark blind. Follow the marking guide systematically. All right, so as the marking guide is put down there, follow that clearly. Develop it as you're going along, because you can focus more and more on what should be there, and maybe there's some other aspects of the learner's work that's valid that you can actually develop into your marking guide. Give them feedback. Okay, give feedback as we do summative, as well as the feedback on the actual script. Make your comments clear and concise and focus on the points that need to be demonstrated. If you say like this image, 6 out of 10 could do better, that's not telling them how they can improve. It's not a very, very good comment, and it's not very good feedback. Mark one section at a time rather than total. So I should mark all the paper ones, then all the paper twos, then all the paper threes, so I can be consistent in the way I apply my marking criteria. Yes, and if you've got large numbers, you must monitor your marking, because sometimes you change in the way you mark things. So often go back and check your first papers and how you mark them. Yes, marking is a big part of your life. So let's look at assessment. We don't want to be unfair. A lot of you have accused me of being unfair, but as a teacher and a marker, you don't want to be accused of being unfair. So therefore, it's so important that you have marking guidelines that you can interpret, that they're comprehensive, that your rubric criteria are correct, so that you can be very objective in the way you mark things. So what's next? We've come to the end of tonight. Okay, this afternoon. Okay, you're always concerned. Your parents and guardians come to your teachers and say, we're so concerned about my child's work. What happened? Your mom and dad might be concerned about you. And then you take them and you show them the marking guide, to show them what their lovely daughter or son, how they answered. And you say, well, what grade do you think it's worth? And I've had this before. And most of the times the parents will know exactly why the students got that mark. Okay. And they will not criticize the teacher because they've marked according to the marking guide. So that's it. You want to be able to say congratulations to your students. I'm so glad you've all passed. I hope I can say that to all of you with this assignment 3 and assignment 4 coming up. And just remember that marking is a huge thing. Marking guides are so important. Criteria are so important. Fairness, objectivity, subjectivity are also important. And consistent use of formative assessments are vital, so that those summative end of year exams are not something that's going to be devastating, because they've practiced how to reach those goals and those outcomes. So I'm saying good night for now, and we'll chat again next week. I'll see you in the week, and I'll see you on email. Okay, ciao for now. Bye.